You are listening to the G-Spot. G-Spot. With David Grant. Winners do what losers don't.
All right, so welcome back. Episode number 9. I hope you do not hear my computer in the background. I've got an update going on, so I'm actually on the bed using the microphone there. So hopefully it sounds good. If the echo is less, I will do it from here more often. And like I said, hopefully you do not hear the computer in the back. Today's topic is about everything being your fault. And what I mean by that, and really kind of going into the trigger of what seems to set people off when it is their fault, and really turning that around and making you and everyone else and myself actually want things to be our fault, because that allows us to then have 100% control. Now, before I get into it, this podcast is actually part of my online program. I'm going to be leveraging this, if you will, as the portion of the lifestyle week, which people receive emails within special videos and PDFs and all that jazz about kind of what I do during the day. So for my cold shower routine, my breathing routine, kind of my mindset routine. And this week is going to be It's All Your Fault. And that's what this podcast is about. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started with what exactly I mean by that. And you know, when I say it's all your fault, when I was young and when my mom used to say blame me or say something was my fault, not saying she did it all the time, but even when it was my fault, I always got very guarded and very defensive. The thing which is interesting about, I don't know, something being your fault is that's actually one of the best things it can be. And what I mean by that is, you know, when I don't know, if I say that the shoulder pain that I have is 100% my fault. Now, granted, it could be from the lacrosse accident. It could be from a car accident, which was somebody else's fault technically, meaning I didn't crash into them. It could be for a lot of different reasons. However, if I say it is all my fault, it sounds a bit harsh, and my mom always hates it when I say it because it could sound, there's many better ways to put it, but I like being very abrupt with it because that really makes you realize that if it is all of your fault, that means you have 100% of the responsibility to change everything. So using the car example, the car wreck example, the car accident, let's say that I was in a car accident and my shoulder got hurt. And so I said, okay, yeah, you know, my shoulder hurts, but it's not all my fault. All right, well, let's put a number behind it. Let's say it's, I don't know, let's go high. Let's say 80% of my shoulder pain is my fault. I could be doing more exercise. I could be doing my rehab. I didn't really focus in the physical therapy, whatever. Let's just say I'm a little bit overweight. I don't know. I eat bad food. 80% of it is my fault. Well, that means that 80% is my 100%. So when I am 100% efficient with taking care of my responsibility of the shoulder pain, that still leaves 20% open that there's nothing I can do. It's out of my reach. That's not my fault. And the thing I think that sucks about that is you could do literally everything right, and only reach 80% of your goal, because that is your 100% in this example. And B, what I think, I don't know, might even be worse, is when you feel that part of it is not your responsibility, your creativity, or at least my creativity to find a solution is not as strong. You know, I always say in entrepreneurial land, you know, we won't search for a solution unless we know there's a problem, right? So if people want to think of an amazing product, they don't think of the product itself, they think of a problem, and then from there they think of a solution to that problem. And it's kind of the same for us. So if I think that 20% of my shoulder pain is due to this car accident, for example, then that gives me 80% of control to fix that, making it my 100%. And if I don't believe all of it is necessarily my fault, then I am not going to be able to find the best solutions. And so I think the first thing we can do, even if, God forbid, technically, obviously not everything is your fault, and you need to be careful saying that, because if you say that around someone that loves to blame people and they realize that you're always willing to take the blame, then they're just going to shovel everything onto you possible. So I say it kind of tongue in cheek that when I tell myself everything is my fault, I don't often necessarily say it out loud, but I say it to myself and I think it to myself. When I had my ex-girlfriend and we would get in arguments, And maybe I very well knew that the reason she was upset with me or things were working were not 100% because of me. Nothing is. I didn't tell myself that. I thought as if it could be 100% my fault. And through that, I was able to come up with solutions that maybe didn't fix that problem because, like I said, not everything was my fault, but it taught me more about myself and it taught me tools to use when I go into a similar situation like that, where maybe something was my fault, and that tool that I thought of actually helped create a solution, if you followed all of that right there. And that all came only because I understood and that everything 100% is not always your fault. But to put that filter on and take a look at things through that direction, it can actually be very empowering and not, it shouldn't be triggering, because that allows you to take ownership of 100% of what you feel can be done and needs to be done. And when you have 100% control of everything, you really are able to think of more solutions, and with more solutions, you have a better chance of finding the solid and the correct solution, because you're able to think in a more 4D creative way. So one of the things I also like to say is that we are built to spec. And what that means is if you buy a computer, if you buy any type of software, it is built to a certain specification. So your computer is as fast as it should be for what you paid for it. Yeah, you've got, I don't know how much RAM, how much gigs, and all that jazz. And that is why your computer runs the way it does. We are the same way. So if we have shoulder pain, well, then there's probably a reason why we do have it. Now, granted, the example with the car accident, obviously some of that is out of your reach. But if we say that blah, blah, blah percent of my shoulder pain is due to the car accident, that car accident is out of your control. But what you can say is, okay, I had a car accident and my shoulder hurts because I was thrown into a position that is not normal. So what can I do to rehab my shoulder back, to gain the strength back, to gain the mobility back, to learn how to use it correctly, to do many different things, to understand that we can take that responsibility. And even though we are built to spec, we can build ourselves to a better spec, if you will. Just like you can upgrade your computer and all that stuff, you can do the same thing to your body. However, what I like to tell people is the bigger the disaster they are, the better. What I mean by that is, imagine if your car was not running, or you had some issues with your car. Let's say when you're driving down the road, it seemed to pull to the right. It squeaks when it squeaked when it brakes. I don't know how you say that. It squeaks when it brakes. And sometimes it doesn't turn on. If you take that car to a mechanic and you tell him that, he's going to start pondering in his head what it could be. He's going to assume that, okay, most likely your tires need to be aligned. Your brakes most likely are old, and maybe your battery needs to be replaced. So when he takes a look at your car and you come back and he says, okay, you know what? Your brakes, your tires, and your your battery, was the problem. This is what it's going to cost, and we can get you on your way. That is the best answer possible, because your car was displaying certain issues. He understood the issues and he took care of them. If you were to come back and he would say, hey, listen, I have no clue what's going on. You owe me this amount of money. I couldn't find anything broken and your car still doesn't run, so I got you a taxi. That is a disaster, because now you have issues, you have problems, and nobody knows where those problems are coming from. So if your shoulder, in this example, hurts and you got in a car accident, your shoulder is weak, your range of motion is poor, the mobility is not good, then that totally makes sense why your shoulder hurts. So now we can say, all right, great. So I understand that my shoulder is the biggest disaster possible, which is good, because if your shoulder did hurt from that car accident and it was strong, it was fit, the mobility was great, everything was perfect, and it still hurt, that's a disaster, because then we don't know why. So in this case, we understand why, we understand what's going on, or why it hurts, I should say. Now, the next step is to understand what we need to do and how we need to do something like that. There's 1,000 ways, 1,000,000 ways to go down this road. Some of them are successful and many of them are not. So I created a little bit of a template so we can understand the easiest way to really go down this path with the highest chance of success. And I say the highest chance of success because at the end of the day, everybody's different. Every body is individual, and we all will respond different ways. However, what we can do is something called modeling. And what that means is I like to call it character transformation. And in this sense, I'm not going to go too deep in this now because this is actually going to be another podcast. But character transformation is obviously something we do for character, but we can apply in this case to the body, and in this specific example, the shoulder. So what I would say is, okay, well, I've got shoulder pain. My mobility's not good. My strength of my rotator cuff is poor. It hurts when I do blah, 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 blah. And I was in a car accident, for example. So what I would want to look for is someone that had something similar. Maybe they are also in a car wreck. Maybe they fell off a bike. Maybe they didn't have any injury at all, but their symptoms and signs were similar to mine. And now they are back to doing what they have done before. Or a doctor that has brought someone back from it, a physical therapist, someone that knows what you're going through, understands the experience, was there themselves, or deals with people that were there and they're no longer there, and or they've brought people from that position to a new position. And what I like to do is I like to actually find the person. And I'll explain in detail why finding the actual person is a little bit better than, like I said before, with a coach or a doctor or a physio that has done it with people. The reason I like to find the person themselves is because I can match it one-to-one. So if my shoulder hurts and it's painful and I'm not able to move it and I'm sitting on the couch in the evening doing Netflix, watching Netflix, I might ask myself the question, okay, well, I have John in my head. Yeah, let's give this person that had the shoulder injury like me that now doesn't have it anymore. Let's name him John. Well, John had this injury, and I wonder what John did during the day. I would ask myself, well, I would think to myself, John probably did his rehab. Did I do my rehab? You know what? No, I didn't. Well, then maybe, if I'm sitting on the couch watching Netflix, I wonder if John would be sitting on the couch watching Netflix if he had not done his rehab. Maybe the answer would be yes, and he would do it after. I don't know. But the thing is most likely John did something that you were not doing. And that brings us back to we are built to spec. There's a reason John's shoulder was hurting him and it's not anymore. And there's a reason yours is and it's continuing to hurt you. So we need to imagine, and if you don't know anyone like that, you've got to think of somebody like that and imagine all the different things they would do, even to where you're going to eat a pint of ice cream and some popcorn in the evening. You might ask yourself, do you think John would eat that pint of ice cream and popcorn in the evening? Maybe he would, maybe she would, whatever, but maybe not when the shoulder is hurting her, because that person might know that if they eat food like that, not necessarily it would inflame their system would be what they're worried about, but maybe that would just give them a food coma, and then they wouldn't feel like doing anything for their shoulder, and they would fall into a lazy state. So when I do anything myself, when I'm working on my online programs, when I'm trying to go on LinkedIn and find new clients, when I'm doing my social media marketing, whatever it is, I always try to find an individual that has reached the position where I want to go. And the character transformation name comes from, I imagine that I am that person and I do the things that they would do. And what I have realized in my life is when I've done that 2 to 3 months later, 2 to 3 weeks later sometimes, not only is my shoulder feeling better, my knee feeling better, my hip feeling better, my social media account is doing better, but things like that pint of ice cream and popcorn, for example, or watching Netflix in the evening, which was normal in this example, totally seem asinine down the road when you've continued to kind of force yourself to be somebody else, if you will, which sounds a bit funny because we usually tell everybody just the opposite. But in this case, by modeling somebody else and pretending you're basically them, you will start to get their results. If you don't believe me, look at someone that's massively overweight, see what they do, start doing it, and you start gaining weight quick in the wrong way. So we see it in the negative sense, but a lot of times I guess it's maybe it sounds too woo-woo or too easy to do it in the positive sense. But I don't know. I mean, I could go on a list of examples of how it's been able to help me with my salsa, with my internet marketing, with my finances, with so many things that I'm not a professional in. I just found a friend or somebody I knew, and sometimes entrepreneurs online that I would be able to model, kind of make their decisions my decisions. And within months, not only were the results impressive, but the way in which it changed the patterns of my thinking and decision making was also something that still to this day blows my mind. The last piece I want to go into, which again, I'm not going to go too deep into this topic because this will be a whole nother podcast by itself, is going to be the feedback loops and really what that means. And, I think it's, we need to be very careful with what we tell ourselves, because feedback loops on a scientific standpoint can go 1,000 different directions. So I'm going to leave the science out of it, and I'm going to kind of dive into the more common sense side of it. And, I should actually caveat that with common sense is not always common practice. So one thing I like to look at is that our perceptions turn into beliefs, and our beliefs become a reality. And a great example of this was I did an online course with a guy named Sam Ovens, and he had a great example of this conundrum. But before I go into this conundrum, let me just give you a little bit of background about Sam Ovens. Forbes did an article of 30 under 30, and at 28 years old with 21 employees, his company was pulling in over $60 million in revenue a year. And really, there's not much bad to say about the guy. I did his course, and I was completely blown away with how professional it was. And with all the online internet marketers out there basically just stealing everybody's money, he by far is not one of them. So for Forbes to write an article about him, for him to be that successful and really be doing it correctly, I think what am I trying to say here? He's a good guy, and that's why I think this example is actually quite good. So I guess it's not really it's kind of pointless to know who he is, but I hate it when people say names in podcasts or something like that, and they just continue to go on and on and on, and I have no clue who they're talking about. So a little bit of a random caveat there, but let's get back on track here. So this idea of perceptions, beliefs, and reality. His example in his online program was he was talking about when he was young, how a teacher told him he was bad at math. And, obviously, if you hear something quite often from somebody, if they tell you you're ugly, you're fat, you're bad at math, you're dumb, whatever, you start to believe it. The thing what was interesting was, he said that when you're using your ears, your eyes, your tongue, your fingers, whatever, touch, hear, all the sensations, it's not really the fingers or the tongue or the nose and all that stuff really doing the job. They're just they're allowing the sensation, but it's computed in your brain. So if we think about perception, if someone, in his example, the teacher told him he was bad at math like one time, and then he repeated it millions of times to himself. So now imagine how often you speak to yourself in a negative way, or not in a positive way, not in a life-supporting way. Let's go ahead and just take the bad at math example. And if someone were to tell you were bad at math, how often do you repeat to yourself that you're bad at math? And then how often does it play into your day? For example, you get the bill and you need to calculate 10% sales tax for the tip of the waiter, and you joke with all your friends and say, yeah, don't give me the receipt, I'm terrible at math. Or maybe you make a mistake and you say, yeah, of course, mathematically that makes sense because I'm bad at math. So not only are you reiterating this perception that makes it your belief and therefore your reality, you're living it more than anyone else has ever told you that. And in this example, when you were only told this one time, that one person could have been jealous at your mathematical capabilities and just took advantage of a mistake that you made. You have no clue. But now you have repeated this one thing that you heard one time, and you've repeated it to yourself hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times until it actually has become your reality. And the way I like to look at it is, that scale that the I don't even know what she's called. When you look at how do you even say it? Law, right? There's that woman that's blindfolded holding the scale. I know it has a name and I always forget it. But I like to imagine one of those scales. And every single time you say something positive or negative, it's like a little stone. The positive stone goes on one side and the negative stone goes on the other side. And when that scale kind of drops down, and imagine instead of being in the air in her hand, it's kind of like on the table. When that scale finally touches the table, like one side, that is your reality. So if you continue to drop these negative stones on the negative side, well, then eventually that will become your reality, whatever that is. And the sad thing is this can be done in multiple ways. You can talk about how you're bad at math. You can talk about how you're not good at putting makeup on, how you're not fit, how your six pack doesn't look good, how your biceps are small, how you always eat bad food, how you can't cook. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's not like we have one scale for everything. There's multiple scales. And if we're not careful, we just have all the scales always leaning on the negative side. Those all become beliefs, and those beliefs become our reality. So what I want us to take away from this podcast of everything being your fault is obviously it is not always your fault. But this is a filter that a narrative, if you will, that we lay on front of the situation so we can take more control, we can be more creative, we can find more ways to take advantage of the situation, if you will, and come up with better solutions. Now, obviously, if you have people in your family or friends or around town that are massive victims, you don't want to run around and tell them it's always your fault because they would be more than happy to blame you for everything. However, I will give a little caveat there and say if you did do that for a week, just for like fun, you would realize by the end of that week, you would learn so much more about yourself, so much more about other people, and so many more creative avenues to come up with solutions that you never had thought of. That would be an interesting experiment. I just want to be careful when I tell people that it's all their fault, that we need to understand that this is a playful way to look at things, and it's sometimes literally not 100% your fault. But the minute we start shifting the blame and not taking it upon ourselves, we lose that creative outlet to come up with even better solutions. So I hope that made sense. I could talk about this for hours upon hours upon hours. This is just something I really want to share this podcast with everybody. And I want to be able to leverage it in the future to really help my clients and everybody else kind of have a grip on how I view things and how we can really turn a lot of negative things that really would trigger many people into not only something neutral or positive, but something we actually want and ask for. So now in situations, I love to tell myself it's all my fault. Or when somebody blames me, which doesn't really happen often because I try not to hang out with people that do those things. But if they do say it's my fault, I love to consider why it could be my fault. And maybe to them, in front of them, I will say, no, it's not my fault because I just need to stand up for myself and not give them the ability to feel that they won an argument that makes no sense. But later I will imagine if it was all my fault, what I would be able to do to make it better. And if there was a solution that I didn't think of at that time that might work for me, for the world, and for the relationship or the friendship I have that with that person better. All right. So then if you have not checked out, speaking of, the Unbreakable Body now has the membership options back. So if you have not gone to the unbreakablebody.com, do so now. Check out the monthly memberships. There's a 6 month option. There's a 1 year option. There's obviously the free 45-minute consultation. There's my free online course. There's a whole bunch going on. I actually just uploaded a shoulder program to Udemy, udemy.com, that online learning site. I'm going to kind of play around with that a little bit with my back program, my shoulder program, my elbow program, my wrist program, and my lower back program. Did I already say that one? And I'm going to have a little bit of fun with that one. So as always, share the podcast. Check me out on Rehab GTS on Instagram. Like my YouTube channel, Grant Training Systems. I'm getting busier on LinkedIn, so check me out there under David Grant. And as always, I wish you all a beautiful week, and I will talk to all of you again very soon.
If you want to find the G-Spot faster, make sure to subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher. Follow Grant Training Systems on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or simply gtsgermany.com. And most importantly, make sure to show and share the G-Spot with your friends.